We talked about the main difference being that in the most holy place, Solomon added giant cherubim that were almost basically half the size of the room going up, and from wingspan to wingspan, the angels covered the entire room. We talked. Oh yes, yeah, statues of angels, just really really big. Um, that's where the Ark of the Covenant was. We then basically coming out from that room, you have two big golden doors and you have a veil. So that's one point of difference from the Moses' tabernacle because he didn't have doors, just the veil. And then basically you have a big open room there. Everything was covered in gold. There was tons of gold. I didn't get into how much gold. I don't know if you're going to get into how much gold was used for the tabernacle, but for the temple, sorry. But it was a lot of gold. And yeah, basically we didn't get into the outer courtyard. One thing that we did bring up last week, which is I think important to repeat, is that this is considered the first temple, right? Where that gets destroyed in the Babylonian invasion, and then later Herod makes what's considered the second temple, and that's what's around when Jesus is alive. And then basically what we are waiting for, slash what people are looking to try to rebuild, is the third temple, which we believe is in heaven coming down as opposed to being remade by human hands. Does that cover it, Rob? Is that good?
That sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that overview of chapter 6. So today we'll be focusing on 1 Kings chapter 7. So chapter 7 shifts to its details of the temple and also to its surroundings, the other buildings that are around. I'm not going to draw a picture because I would probably just draw like a house with like a door and smoke coming out of a chimney, you know. Very simple. So not as good as Chris in regards to my artistry. So let's read. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 7 and read verses 1 through 12. Do I have a volunteer? Carlos, yeah, grab a mic.
Is it okay that I use the translation SLT or whatever translation?
Whatever you want.
You just got to grab the mic and you could take it off there or whatever. You just grab it and hold it right in, okay? Like right there on the.
Do it New King James. Yeah, just in case. I don't know what the. Right there. Okay, so I'll be reading the New King James version then. Verse 1. Okay. So verse 1. But Solomon took 13 years to build his own house, so he finished all his house. He also built the house of the forest of Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits, with 4 rows of cedar pillars and cedar beams on the pillars. Verse 3. And it was paneled with cedar above the beams that were on 45 pillars, 15 to a row. There were windows with beveled frames in 3 rows, and window was opposite window in 3 tiers, and all the doorways and and doorposts had rectangular frames. And window was opposite window in 3 tiers. He also made the hall of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits, and its width 30 cubits. And in front of them was a portico with pillars, and a canopy was in front of them. Verse 7. Then he made a hall for the throne, the hall of judgment, where there he might judge, and it was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the house where he dwelt had another court inside the hall, of like workmanship. Solomon also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken as wife. All these were of costly stones, cut to size, trimmed with saws inside and out, from the foundation to the eaves, and also on the outside to the great court. The foundation was costly stones, large stones, some 10 cubits and some 8 cubits. And above were costly stones, hewn to size, and cedar wood. The great court was enclosed with 3 rows of hewn stones and a row of cedar beams. So were the inner court of the house of the Lord and the vestibule of the temple.
Thank you, Carlos. So up until this point, we've been flipping back from First Kings to Second Chronicles because there's a lot of parallels there. Both books cover many of the same events, but from different perspectives. Regarding the temple, though, First Kings describes its construction and significance with Solomon in the focus, right? However, in Chronicles, it highlights the temple in more of like a spiritual context, as it being the center of God's presence and the heart of worship. So now regarding Solomon's temple in First Kings, the description is detailed, showing Solomon's wealth, his wisdom. However, in Chronicles, Solomon's palace is barely mentioned. It's barely mentioned there. Its focus stays on the temple. So for verse 1 through 12, we're going to stay here. So let's look at Solomon's temple, palace complex. We see it takes 13 years to build, right? 13 years. We see that in verse 1. It was the house of the forest of Lebanon. That's what it was called. 13 years. Does anyone know how long it took for the temple to be built? Millie. 7 years. Thank you. Correct. And that's in 1 Kings 6:38. So it's assumed that all of these buildings were being built simultaneously, right? This whole complex. It had the temple. It had all these other buildings. That the temple and the additional buildings included Solomon's house. So we can look at it in two different ways, right? They either prioritized the temple construction and completed it first after 7 years, then continued the rest of the buildings, completing all in 13 years, or more of an emphasis was put on the palace, right? Solomon's palace. An additional building was taking them longer to construct. For me, I mean, see you guys what I'm saying? Like, so did they prioritize the temple for the first 7 years? Or did they put more of an emphasis on all the other buildings because it said they took 13 years for those buildings? For me, I believe, the temple was prioritized. I think they prioritized the building of the temple, having its construction completed first. What do you guys think? Any thoughts? What do you got, Chris?
Okay, yeah, one per table. So I'll give Solomon the benefit of the doubt that he built God's house first, then he built his house. My question is that obviously his house took almost twice as long to build than God's house. And Solomon being the king of Israel, did he have to have a big house just because he was the king of Israel? Because I'm pretty sure everyone else in Israel didn't have a house as big as his. So does being the king imply that you need to have a palace at all?
Well, in my perspective, and then we'll go to Kyle. It was a complex, so there was many different functions of this complex, right? So not only was the temple there, obviously number one, but then we're going to learn about the other pillars and the hallways that were then leading to Solomon's residence, right? And in those other buildings, there were a lot of administrative and governmental offices and just like things that occurred where his like proximity to where he lived had to be close. So did he have to have a Cribs house? I don't know.
Hold on.
So I'll give you that one, that his house had a function, right? What about his wife? Did she need her also her own when we get there? Okay.
We'll open up for discussion when we get there.
So, okay. So let me answer this one real quick. But doesn't he make gold as like frequent as it's like not? It's very common thing, right? It says he made gold is as common as no as iron. So that's kind of important because now everyone there is rich. So he's not building a house. He's not saying, "Bless me and you'll be blessed," and then you don't actually get the blessing. He brought gold in, and yeah, he built a house, but everyone within that infrastructure within that time also was rich. It's a huge a part of that also, because that's what wisdom promises. Sorry.
Miriam,
My question is in reference to
talk
that
closer to the
I'm
mic,
sorry.
please. Thank you. Closer, really
My
close, like, yeah.
question in emphasis of the temple, whether there was more importance to the temple to the palace, did God really require for his temple to be so magnificent and glorious? Because if I remember correctly, when David tries to build a temple, he says to David, right, I don't need a temple to live in. I don't live in a temple. The temple wasn't made for God, it was made for man.
What the temple did, I didn't get a chance because I was with the kids and I didn't want to interrupt the study. What the temple was, the temple that Solomon had was actually a prophecy of what Zion was. Do you not think it's coincidental that coming into the Holy of Holies, there was a hallway of gold? Does that not sound like Zion that says you're going to have streets of gold, walls of a certain color? So think of the colors like everything that the temple was built upon, Solomon's temple, is also it's a prophecy to what was is coming. And what's cool is if you go back to the infrastructure, take Chris's 3D drawing when you're looking down into it, and now find that where Zion is. Find all of that. And that's what's actually really radical when you start looking at it, what the walls of Zion are built on. What the city of Zion is built within. Is the very infrastructure of Zion is it's very cool is that you can actually parallel Solomon's temple to that instead of looking at it as like why did Solomon build such a fancy temple? Well, it was prophetic. And then the other answer to this, I'm going to call out every single time, that particular temple pays for sin. You're going to see across the entire First Kings book. Every time they come in, the king takes gold from them and then relents his anger. Comes in and takes their silver from them and relents his anger. Comes in and takes bronze. So you'll actually see across all the way up until there's nothing left and they take the very bronze. That kingdom that they're setting up is actually going to pay for their sin across the generations to come. You'll see as we keep reading, because I'm going to call it out. Just put that, if you don't understand what I just said, put it in your pocket. And then as we keep reading, it'll start to make sense. Okay?
All right, let's keep going. So let's look at this house of the forest of Lebanon, okay? It was a massive complex structure. It was not in Lebanon. It was the house of the forest of Lebanon, but it was not in Lebanon. It was in Jerusalem. So why the name? It was built with an enormous amount of cedar wood from Lebanon. These huge cedar beams were imported from Lebanon, which was famous for its forests, and they lined the interior of the palace, making it look like a forest. When you walked inside, you saw rows and rows of gigantic tree trunk like pillars, like being in a forest. So, why cedar? We're going to have a little lesson on cedar wood. I know it's exciting for you kids, right? Like Chris said last week, they weren't using Home Depot's 2x4s, right? They were using the best choice wood and materials that they could. Cedar was resistant to rot. Okay, cedar is naturally resistant to rot. All the way up until today, for thousands of years, cedar wood has been used as a popular choice for building materials and used for siding, decking, fencing, and outdoor furniture. So cedar is naturally resistant to rot and insect infestations. It's weather resistant doesn't warp, doesn't shrink, and it's a beautiful wood. It is a rich, warm color with natural variations that enhance the visual appeal when used. So the last thing about cedar, and the coolest thing, in my opinion, is the reason why it it doesn't rot and why it's resistant and so durable outdoors. Cedar contains certain oils. It contains certain oils and acids that provide resistance to moisture, decay, and insect damage. So in short, I'll be building our next home out of cedar. Yeah. Any thoughts on cedar wood? If not, we'll just keep going. Yeah. Just gotta
So my question to that would be, does it say anywhere in scripture what type of wood Noah was instructed to gather
Yeah.
to use?
That was acacia wood, right? Gopher wood.
Gopher wood?
Gopher wood.
So it's something different. Okay.
I don't have a study on gopher wood. Maybe next time we'll do that. Yeah, good question. Yeah. So the house of the forest of Lebanon was 100 cubits long, which is 150 feet long, half a football field. Okay. 50 cubits wide, or 75 feet wide. It was 30 cubits high, or 45 feet high, like a 4.5 story building. 4 rows of cedar pillars and cedar beams on the pillars. Verses 3 and 4. And it was paneled with cedar above the beams, and there were on 45 pillars, 15 to a row. There were windows with beveled frames in 3 rows, and windows with opposite window in 3 tiers. So there was a lot of natural light in this building. Verse 5. And all the doorways and doorposts had rectangular frames, and window was opposite window in 3 tiers. So this is the last of the information we'll get on the house of the forest of Lebanon before we move on to the next building. Okay? And we see that in verse 6. But first, what was the purpose of this structure? The house of the forest of Lebanon, which was equivalent to a modern day warehouse. So this house was equivalent to a modern day warehouse. And what was its purpose? So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 10. So we're going to go ahead a little bit. 1 Kings chapter 10, and we're going to read 16 through 17. Sure.
Okay. 1 Kings 10, 16, and 17. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 15 pounds of gold went into each shield. He made 300 small shields of hammered gold. About 4 pounds of gold went into each shield. The king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon.
Okay, so we see the function, or one of the functions of this house. And we see golden shields, weapons, and defensive equipment were held there. So it was used as an armory, right? And some other functions as well, as like an audience hall, maybe some sort of bank where they kept all their stuff, their gold and their silver, as it says here. So that was those were some of the functions of this building. The next building we're going to talk about is in verse 6. Okay, and it's the hall of the pillars. It was 50 cubits long, which is 75 feet long, and 30 cubits wide, which is 45 feet wide. Now, this place served most likely as like a grand entry hall, right? A grand entry hall or public gathering court. So you walk into the temple, you leave the temple, you're going into then the house of the forests of Lebanon, and then you're now entering the hall of pillars. It functioned like a portico, right? Or like a roofed structure supported by columns. And it connected the house of the forest of Lebanon to the hall of judgment. Okay? The hall of judgment, which is the next place we're going to talk about. And this is the whole complex. We're describing this whole complex. that Solomon built, that it took him 13 years to build. So the Hall of Judgment was most likely the official throne room where Solomon rendered legal judgments. Remember we were talking about earlier how these different buildings, and they served a purpose, and there was governmental happenings happening there. He met with ambassadors and held meetings. It was a central building in the administrative areas of the palace compound. Verse 8. And he did likewise for all his foreign wives who burn in. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Let's go back. I was like, that didn't make any sense. 1 Kings chapter 7, we're going to go back to verse 8. And the house where he dwelt had another court inside the hall of like workmanship. Solomon also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken for a wife. Here we see Solomon's private residence, okay? It was built with similar stone and cedar as these other buildings, and decorated richly but separate from the public structure, so he had a nice buffer, right? It was situated in another court inward from the hall. So it was located deeper within the complex, most likely for privacy and security. The second part of verse 8 says that Solomon also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken for a wife. So it was of similar craftsmanship and likely contained staff, attendants, her own room, and worship space. It was separate from Solomon's residence and not mixed, respecting Israelite purity concerns. And that's found in 2 Chronicles 8 through 11. 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 11. So let's go there. And then we can open that up so we can talk about that. 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 11. Second Chronicles chapter 8, verse 11. Now Solomon brought the daughter of Pharaoh up from the city of David to the house he had built for her. For he said, my wife shall not dwell in the house of David, king of Israel, because the places to which the ark of the Lord has come are holy. Very interesting. She got her own house. Right. So he didn't want to. He didn't want to mix holy with unholy. Right. However, he married her. Yeah.
So he justified having her, giving her a she shed. What were you going to say?
So thank you. So my understanding is that because she was a daughter of Pharaoh, she was not walking in the commandments, so he separated her from the holy place, the holy, God's temple. That's my understanding. That's correct.
Yeah.
So, but what about all his other wives too? Did they all have their own houses as well?
I think this one is spoken of because it's specific to what we read back in 1 Kings chapter 3. If you
Okay.
guys want to go there, we can go check it out.
Thank
1 Kings chapter 3, verse 1. First Kings chapter 3, verse 1. Now Solomon made a treaty. He made a treaty with the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married Pharaoh's daughter. Then he brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall all around Jerusalem. So yeah, there we see it. It's spoken of in First Kings. So that's probably why they highlighted it, and it was very important because it was a treaty with Pharaoh. So that would be my understanding of it. What do you think, Kyle?
I agree. There's no conversion. It's not like she's Israeli in heart, right? That's what I mean by that. She's not trying, like you said, she's not following the commandments. That wasn't the agreement, though. The agreement was a treaty agreement. It was a political marriage. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But did God approve it? But did God approve this? This is not God approved, right? Yes.
That's a really good question for another time. Because you're asking a question that would take a little bit of the study away, and I just don't want to take away from the study. All right.
Yeah, if we find any free time during the study, we can open that up. Okay. So let's go back to 1 Kings chapter 7, verse 9. All these were of costly stones. So we just described the house of the forest of Lebanon. We described the hall of pillars. We described the hall of judgment, and we described Solomon's house and Pharaoh's daughter's house, his wife. Verse 9. All these were of costly stones cut to size, trimmed with saws inside and out, from the foundation to the eaves, and also on the outside to the great court. The foundation was of costly stones, large stones, some 10 cubits and some 8 cubits. And above were costly stones hewn to size, and cedar wood. The great court was enclosed with 3 rows of hewn stones and a row of cedar beams. So were the inner court of the house of the Lord and the vestibule of the temple. So these massive stones were laid inside and out, and they were cut to precision. They were cut on the faces of both stones, right? These were giant stones. And they ran the entire height of each building. So these were not rubble stone walls that you would maybe expect, but these were finely cut blocks. This shows that the place mirrored the temple in style and dignity. Okay, so we're going to move on, unless you guys have anything else to say about construction of these buildings. Okay. Verses 13 and 14. Would somebody like to read those? Gia, you want to read? Grab Mike.
Okay.
That the mics, if you hold them back out here and we had mics that picked up, it would pick up everyone's sound.
So
the-
like this?
Yeah, you can even, like, I was always taught this when preaching one time. Keep the mic even on the bottom of your chin. So if you hold it right there, that's why I put these little cushions on there. That way you can even hold it on your chin. Okay?
Is this good?
Perfect.
Go? Okay. Now King Solomon sent and brought Huram from Tyre. He was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a bronze worker. He was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill in working with all kinds of bronze work. So he came to King Solomon and did all his work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So here we meet Huram, the master craftsman and general contractor. He obviously had a good reputation for what he did, and nowadays would have like a 5-star Google review if Solomon had sent for him, right? So Solomon sent for him to build all of these structures. This Hiram from Tyre, he's different from the king Hiram of Tyre. We can't get the two mixed up and confused because they're different. Remember the king who sent all the cedar wood to Solomon for wheat, barley, oil, and wine. We read about that, I think, about 2 chapters ago. 2 different people, but from the same place. So verses 1 through 12 describe the palace, right? And 15 through 51 describe the craftsmanship of the temple. So let's read 15 through 22. Who would like to read that? Susan? There's one right there.
For he cast 2 pillars of brass of 18 cubits high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits did compass either of them about. And he made 2 chapiters, that's the same as a capital, chapiters of molten brass to set upon the tops of the pillars. The height of the one chapiter was 5 cubits, and the height of the other chapiter was 5 cubits. The nets of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the chapiters which were upon the top of the pillars, 7 for the one chapiter and 7 for the other chapiter. And he made the pillars and two rows round about upon one network to cover the chapiters that were upon the top with pomegranates. And so he did for the other chapiter. And the chapiter that were upon the top of the pillars were of lily work in the porch, 4 cubits. And the chapiters upon the 2 pillars had pomegranates also above, over again the belly which was by the network. And the pomegranates were 200 in rows round about upon the other chapiter. And he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple, and he set up the right pillar and called the name thereof Yakin. And he set upon the left pillar and called the name thereof Boaz. And upon the top of the pillars was lily work. So was the work of the pillars finished.
Okay. Thank you. So your translation says chapiters. So chapiters equals capitals equals top decorative section. Okay, just so we're all aware of what this actually means. So this describes the making of. So what we just read describes the making of 2 massive bronze pillars that stood in front of the temple. Right. They're not part of the palace, but of the temple entrance made by Hiram, the bronze craftsman. We see 2 huge pillars made of bronze, hollow cast, which mean they were hollow, that were each 27 feet tall, 18 feet in circumference, and 6 feet in diameter. Each pillar had a decorative top section, or capital, of 7.5 feet, and each top section had lattice work, or like netting, or a mesh pattern with decorative bronze chains around them. Also, they had rows of bronze pomegranates. So let's talk about the pomegranates. Pomegranates symbolize fruitfulness, life, and God's blessing. There were also lily flowers, 6 feet tall bronze lilies. Lilies symbolize purity, beauty, and life from God. Then we see additional pomegranates under the lilies. So Hiram set up the pillars. The right one was named Jachin, and the left named Boaz. Does anybody know what Jachin and Boaz, the what they mean? Jazz? Do you know what Jachin and Boaz mean? Sorry to put you on the spot, but usually you got that stuff.
No. Boaz is strength, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
And what is the other word?
Jachin. Jachin.
Oh,
Jachin.
Jachin. Oh no, I don't know.
Okay. Sorry, just making sure you guys are awake. Jachin he shall establish. Boaz in him is strength. So yeah, you guys got it. So, if you put it all together, it's God will establish his house in strength. Okay, so that's the meaning. Do you have something to say, D? Or okay. I think I was going to, but I don't know if I did. I know. Do you know it? Yeah, go grab a mic.
For whatever it's worth, a little detail on Haram I have in my commentary here. Uh, he he's a mix. His father was a Phoenician, and his father married a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, according to 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 14. And Pascal says he's called a Danite. That's not confusing that Haram, is it? Okay. Same Haram?
So these pillars, some scholars say they acted like a pillar of cloud of and fire, guardians of the sacred space. So ancient temples had guardian figures on the outside of them, right? Lions, sphinxes, so on and so forth. However, Israel's symbolic pillars signaled you are entering holy ground, and God protects those who enter. So they were almost a warning or a reminder before you walked in. Let's keep going. Let's read 23 through 26. Somebody would like to read those verses? Millie.
23 to 26. And he made a molten sea 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round all about, and its height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. And under the brim of it round about there were knops compassing it, 10 and a cubit, compassing the sea round about. The knops were cast into 2 rows when it was cast. It stood above 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was a handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup. With flowers of lilies it contained 2,000 baths.
All right, thank you. So here we're introduced to the Bronze Sea, or the Sea of Cast Metal. But first, let's speak to the process of casting bronze. I think it's important that we understand how these things were made, right? And how these structures were constructed. Well, first, where did they get the bronze? Do you guys know where they got all this bronze from? Well, 1 Chronicles 18:8, David captured huge amounts of bronze from Hadaezer, king of Zobah, plus bronze shields and items from other battles. This gave Solomon massive stockpiles of raw metal. So they obtained it through battle. 1 Chronicles 18:8. So now they have all this bronze, right? Like, what do we do with it? And at this time, bronze was the best metal available for large-scale casting. Bronze melts at a lower temperature than iron, around 1,742 degrees, which was easy to melt and pour. It's extremely resistant to corrosion. Bronze can take incredible detail and was culturally associated with divine strength and judgment. Interesting fact about bronze. So how exactly did they cast these enormous objects, like these 27-foot pillars and this giant basin? How did they do it, right? Clay molds were built. They built these clay molds, a core mold, an inner shape, and then an outer mold. And the space between them would be filled with molten bronze. Okay? You guys get that? Okay, you tracking? Okay. After cooling, the molds were broken off. And they required some modifications, but then they were sent to Jerusalem. They were sent to Jerusalem by ox-drawn sledges, rollers, ramps, and teams of men. So it was a collaborative effort to get these objects back to Jerusalem. So the hiring of Hiram of Tyre, the Jordan Valley having perfect clay and furnaces for large-scale casting, huge stockpiles of bronze, and manpower made all of this possible. Okay? Let's talk about the sea and oxen. So we read, Millie read 23 through 26, which describes the sea and the oxen. The Bronze Sea, or basin, was 15 feet wide. It was 7.5 feet tall and about 45 feet around, and was one piece of bronze, a solid piece of bronze. It had gourd-shaped ornaments and was supported by 12 bronze oxen underneath it, right? So it had these 12 bronze oxen underneath this giant basin. And these oxen symbolized the 12 tribes. The top rim was shaped like a lily blossom, and its rim was around 3 inches thick. It says it held 2,000 baths, which is about 11,500 gallons of water. I know I'm hitting you guys with a lot of numbers. This basin was used by priests for ritual purification. Okay? Any thoughts before we move on? Hose? A well and a hose. Mike?
So I kind of researched this, and it says that each cattle underneath its foot had these pipes going through, getting to where the running water was because it had to be living water. So those pipes would bring the water into the big basins. So interesting. I just found that interesting.
Good thought. Thank you. It's funny. I actually thought of that question too, and I was like, let me research that, and just so I have that on hand. And I'm like, nah, nobody's gonna ask that. Yeah. All right. Let's read 27 through. Yeah. Right. I know. I know. Let's read 27 through 39. Who would like to volunteer to read those passages, Miss Lisette?
Okay. 27 to
39.
39. Okay. He also made 10 carts of bronze. 4 cubits was the length of each cart, 4 cubits its width, and 3 cubits its height. And this was the design of the carts. They had panels, and the panels were between frames. On the panels that were between the frames were lions, oxen, and cherubim. And on the frames was a pedestal on top. Below the lions and the oxen were wreaths of plated work. Every cart had 4 bronze wheels and axles of bronze, and its 4 feet had supports. Under the laver were supports of cast bronze beside each wreath. Its openings inside the crown at the top was 1 cubit in diameter, and the opening was round, shaped like a pedestal, 1.5 cubits in outside diameter, and also on the opening were engravings, but the panels were square, not round. Under the panels were 4 wheels, and the axles of the wheels were joined to the cart. The height of the wheel was 1.5 cubits. The workmanship of the wheels was like the workmanship of a chariot wheel. Their axle pins, their rims, their spokes, and their hubs were all cast of bronze. And there were 4 supports at the 4 corners of each cart. Its supports were part of the cart itself. On the top of the cart, at the height of half of a cubit, it was perfectly round, and on the top of the cart, its flanges and its panels were of the same casting. On the plates of its flanges and on its panels, he engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees wherever there was a clear space on each with wreaths all around. Thus he made the 10 carts. All of them were on the same mold, one measure and one shape. Then he made 10 lavers of bronze. Each laver contained 40 baths, and each laver was 4 cubits. On each of the 10 carts was a laver. Am I even saying that right? Is that laver or laver? Laver? Okay. Oh, wait. I just got two.
It's laver.
What is it?
Laver.
Laver.
No, I don't know.
Stop. Okay. And he put 5 carts on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house. He set the sea on the right side of the house toward the southeast.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love how this is all so specific. You know, I think it's cool. But there was a lot there, so let's unpack it. So we learned about the 10 carts of bronze, 10 carts of bronze, which were movable stands with wheels, right? carts. Think about a cart that you can move. Designed to hold bronze basins, smaller basins with water, right, for ritual washing. Okay, they were functional and very decorative too, which is a plus. So basically, here's how it worked. The much larger sea of bronze, which we already talked about, right? The much larger sea of bronze that held the 11,500 gallons of water, acted like a central reservoir. It acted like a reservoir, while the smaller basins made practical for individual priests to purify themselves without going directly to the large sea. Um, so they would fill up those little basins from the larger basin, and they bring them over to these carts. Okay, and then the priests would use those for ritual hand washing. Nikki, there's a mic behind. Oh, there's one right there. Okay.
Is this why in Catholic churches in the front they have the basin with the water that you're supposed to like dip your hands in and do the cross?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Anybody have any specific info on that? Miss Susan?
As a former Catholic, everything they do is imitating Yah, but they pervert it.
Already. Drop that mic. Miss Jasmine.
So they have these images here, the cherubim, the oxen, and the lions. And I know that's like what that's supposed to look like, but are they supposed to really like do that? Because isn't that breaking a commandment of having a carved image of something that is in heaven or earth?
What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I feel like he gets a lot of exceptions, but what do you think?
So the cherubim was allowed for the ark,
Oh, for the ark, yeah,
right?
of the covenant.
Was there anything else? Are there any other created objects that God allowed in the temple or tabernacle? Like he instructed it to be made. Yeah, but were there trees? No. Yeah, and it's not made. It's real palm trees or like make them out of an. They're real trees. Yeah, so I think the cherubim's the only example that God, like I don't. I think the command, because this got brought up a couple years ago with a group I used to be with. Because people are like, oh, we can't use coloring books, we can't watch movies, we can't. And I try to. The way I see it is the commandment to not make those things created. It's in worship, and idol, worshiping them. Yeah. So art or designing isn't breaking the
Makes sense.
command.
Yeah, no, definitely answer my question. Yes.
Wait, it says here though that in 36 on the plates of the phalanges and on its panels he engraved cherubim, lion, and palm trees. So they were engraved.
So it's art.
Yeah, the trees.
It was art. Yeah. And the command is this. This was the like this was the point that I was going to get to. You shall not make for yourself the carved image any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that earth is beneath, or that is in your water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. It's all commas. It's all particular to idol worship. So don't make cherubim and idol worship them. Wait, can you say that out loud?
I said, so we can't carry around a little angel for protection.
All right. Sure.
I just heard this the other day. I think it's also part of the error is, and no offense anybody, but they were saying, I think it was Charlie Kirk's wife was saying something about, oh, he just loved Saint Michael and bloody doody doo dee da, and that's part of idolatry, I believe. I don't know. What do you guys think? You know, even bringing Saint Michael up like that. Well, he's not saint.
Yeah,
He's an
so
angel.
yeah,
See, they called him a saint. I just made an error for saying that.
Charlie Kirk's wife was a Catholic, and Charlie Kirk, from the testimonies, Candace Owens and the wife, he was exploring Catholicism. There was stuff about he liked the building, the cathedrals, the looks, and he'd rather do communion, you know, in that setting than in like an auditorium with Christian Protestant or in like the house, a regular home. So unfortunately, yes, he was exploring. So I recently heard, yeah, the wife said he had a Saint Michael. Saint Michael was his favorite. Yeah. So yeah, I heard that too, and I was like, oh. But he kept the Sabbath. He was searching. He was searching for truth. He was like a truth. He was a truth seeker. He definitely was like a debater, a truth seeker, open minded, kind of guy.
Icky.
This is back to like the cherubim and if it's idolatry or not. I have a tattoo of the archangel Michael defeating Satan. Does that count?
No, it doesn't count.
That's really biblical, actually. The answer is no, it doesn't count.
Okay.
It
I mean,
counts as
obviously I can't do
it
anything
counts
about
as
it now.
it counts as idol worship because that's where essentially it comes from. But how you can live it, that is how you change. That's the testimony, right? So that's it.
All right. Oh, Alyssa,
So I don't want to derail the study at all,
derail away.
but in the beginning, Kyle, when you said that, what you said in the beginning is of interest to me. When you said that this temple is prophetic for the one to come, is there anywhere in the scriptures that would kind of like tell us more about that? Like I know that Zion's described, I know all of that stuff, but is there any scriptures that would say like that this temple, like, is there anything that you can share? Okay.
Read the temple that's built with Ezekiel, and every single setup from Ezekiel is also for that temple. Because think about this. This is something to also think of. And Chris and I actually studied this for about 4 hours on Monday, wherever Chris was, because I had called him up, and then it was like an hour long, and he sent me on a pretty deep rabbit trail. Thanks, Chris. Was where did Ezra and Nehemiah get their direction on how to build the temple? And it's interesting is the Ezekiel temple, when he's given a measurements, you'll actually see it's very prophetic also, because he'll say something in Ezekiel about building, and then he'll say something about what's to come, and then he'll say something in Ezekiel about building, and then he'll say, but like in the future, it doesn't say but, you'll see in the future, you'll see like terms where it'll actually say. So it's actually really, really cool when you go back and look at it and read slow, Ezekiel 40 to 44. So everything from Solomon to that is the exact same replica.
Alrighty. Let's continue. So, who would like to read verse 40 to the end? Brother D.
Okay. Haram made the lavers and the shovels and the bowls. So Haram finished doing all the work that he was to do for King Solomon, for the house of Yahuwah. The two pillars, the two bowl-shaped capitals that were on top of the two pillars, the two networks covering the two bowl-shaped capitals, which were on top of the pillars, 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 bowl-shaped capitals that were on top of the pillars. The 10 carts and 10 lavers on the carts, 1 sea, and 12 oxen under the sea, the pots, the shovels, and the bowls. All these articles which Hiram made from for King Solomon for the house of Yahuwah were of burnished bronze. In the plain of Jordan, the king had them cast in clay molds between Succoth and Zaratan. And Solomon did not weigh all the articles because they were so many. The weight of the bronze was not determined. Thus Solomon had all the furnishings made for the house of Yahuwah, the altar of gold, and the table of gold, on which was the showbread, the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, in front of the inner sanctuary, with the flowers and lamps and the wick trimmers of gold, the basins, the trimmers, the bowls, the ladles, and the censers of pure gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner room, the most holy place, and the doors on the main hall of the temple. So all the work that King Solomon had done for the house of Yahuwah was finished, and Solomon brought in the things which his father David had dedicated, the silver and the gold and the furnishings. He put them in the treasuries of the house of Yahuwah.
All right, thank you. So we see Hiram's work, right? He completed all his work. He finished his job. Now we can get paid. Um, we see it summarized in verse 46 describes the location of where the bronze had been cast, right? So verse 46, in the plain of Jordan, the king and them cast in clay molds between Succoth and Zaratan. So I actually sent a little 2 little pictures to the signal group. If you want to go, guys, want to go there real quick, and we can check on the map where that actually is. So there's 2. There's like one zoomed in version and one more of an aerial view. So all these items were casts created between Zarathan and Succoth near the Jordan River. Okay, you guys see that? All right. Succoth is across the river, east. Yep. Northeast. Yep. So the Jordan Valley has clay, right? Clay soil, and it's perfect for molds. So that area was perfect for creating these molds. There was plenty of water for cooling and mixing the clay, and there was space for giant furnaces. They had these giant furnaces, right? The valley was rich in ore smelting workshops. They were already active in the Iron Age. So this basically looked like an ancient industrial like foundry zone, right? So verse 40 to the end shows the completion of the temple furnishings. The golden altar, the tables for the showbread, the lampstands, the flowers, the lamps, the wick trimmers of gold. That's pretty cool, right? Trimming wicks with these gold wick trimmers. Let me get one of those. And all the utensils and bronze items. So verse 51, this which is what does it say? So all the work that King Solomon had done for the house of Yahuwah was finished, and Solomon brought in the things which his father David had dedicated, the silver and the gold and the furnishings. He put them in the treasuries of the house of Yahuwah. So this describes construction being completed, and those items, I'm sorry, that the house of the Lord was complete, and at that point, David's dedicated items were brought in. They were brought in because all the construction was completed. So now all these items are being brought in. The silver and the gold furnishings, they were put into the treasuries of the house of Yahuwah. Solomon's temple was finished and equipped exactly as planned. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 6, and we're going to read 12 through 13. 1 Kings chapter 6, 12 through 13. Well, we can start at 11. Then the word of the Lord came to Solomon, saying, concerning this temple which you are building, if you walk in my statutes, execute my judgments, keep all my commandments, and walk in them, then I will perform my word with you, which I spoke to your father David, and I will dwell among the children of Israel, and will not forsake my people Israel. So it emphasizes that the temple was built according to God's plan, right? Which was revealed to Solomon. It was revealed to him, these plans. I will dwell among the Israelites and not abandon my people Israel. Okay? Any thoughts on that, guys? All right. So why do we do this? Why are we going over all this stuff? We just finished this chapter 7. Why do we go into such detail about picking all this apart, right? Most people who read this would gloss over it, just keep on moving. I know I have in the past. But that's not what we do here, right? It's not what we do here. We believe this is truly the Word of God, and each word and each detail has significance. Understanding the complexity and detail of not only the temple and the palace complex, but of the planning and the implementation and all the backstory that took place, it allows the reader, me and you, to understand or have a snapshot into how truly significant this was, right? And if we think this is cool, I can only imagine what it will be like when the ultimate house of God comes down from heaven. Christ will be our King, dwelling with us, and the glory of God will light our eternal worship forever. That's Revelation 21, 22 through 23. And that's all I have. So thank you. Any thoughts? All right, let's pray out. Who would like to pray out? Kyle, can you pray? Alyssa, can you pray out?
Heavenly Father, Most High, Holy One of Israel, we thank you for your Sabbath day. We thank you that we get to be together. We thank you for the study. We thank you for the wisdom that you gave to Rob. We pray that it blessed everybody here. And we just pray that reading about this temple can get us excited and looking forward to the one to come, where we'll have the best king, the holy king, the King of Kings. We thank you for the message. We just pray. I just want to pray blessings over everybody here. Pray that you'll bless their weeks coming up ahead, and pray that we can walk in your ways, and that we can love you with our whole hearts, love others. We pray for covering over our children as they go into this week. We just pray that you'll protect them. You'll protect their eyes and ears from evil and all the things that are in the world around us. And we look forward to a world where we don't have to worry about those things. And we're just thankful for everybody here who came, who drove. Pray for travel mercies for them as they travel home. We just pray all these things in Yeshua's name. Amen.
I just want to add something because I promised 3 of my siblings I would lift up their name today in prayer. Praying for Stacy's mother, Christine. It's my sister Karen for healing, my brother Peter in his unbelief, and for all of our family members who are lost and blind. I pray that we really